Hey, so I tried to get out of Eurorack. I sold a bunch of modules, also sold some synths, and did what any synth nut would do after coming into a large sum of money. I dumped it into more modular. I don't know what's wrong with me, but this time I think I finally got it right. See, I used to have the somewhat arrogant belief that I could create something better suited to my taste than a bunch of dedicated synth companies. And that would be without spending a small fortune or really much experience at all. Just kind of going off like, oh yeah, that sounds good. It doesn't work like that. There's so much out there, not to mention a lot of encouragement from well-meaning people on YouTube saying that you can get into Eurorack without breaking the bank. Well, you can, just don't expect your creations to sound quite how you want or have much of a sweet spot without iterations on your design. You know, you got to do it multiple times, build it and then rebuild it. Try again. And you might need to lay down some serious stacks anyway if you want something that's personalized, deep, highly playable, and all of that without compromising on sound quality. And that's just kind of like the baseline expectations for a production instrument these days. But my idea for this system was to emphasize the last 2 points a little more than before. Playability here meant opting for larger designs with bigger knobs, like the Erica Synths Black Series. Sound quality is more difficult. I'll go over the individual modules in a minute here, but the idea is that every module adds a little dash of special sauce in addition to what it's supposed to do, based off of my favorite synths, the Matriarch and the MS-20, because I think they do that. Now, the depth of any system is a little bit at odds with the playability, but ultimately, it comes down to modulation and utilities. And as far as the personalization goes, well, I wanted something that could sound incredibly old. So for me, that means sine waves, ring mod, tape, manual control, that kind of thing. I'm not looking for a techno machine or generative music or fat bass. I just wanted to focus on ambient sequences and sound effects that are unflinchingly unique. Kind of in the same spirit as the Erica Synths Syntrex. Let's check out the modules. The first module we should check out is the Make Noise DPO. Now, this has been around since like 2012, which in Eurorack years, it's basically the beginning of time. DPO stands for Dual Primary Oscillator, and it's basically a little West Coast system just all in one module. So you get 2 oscillators. And for me, the reason I wanted this oscillator is that it has 2 sine waves and it's got some easily accessible FM. The other stuff, I wasn't super privy to actually. I'm not particularly familiar with West Coast synthesis and all of that stuff, but I have used this for a little while now and it's really cool, although it gets a little bright for me. It's easy to use. It has onboard attenuators for all of your different jacks here. Like this is for our exponential FM. This is for linear FM. You got more attenuators here. This is FM for this other one. All of these have all of these inputs, that things that you can modulate. You don't need a VCA to attenuate whatever modulation you send in. So that's pretty cool. I really like that. And of course, it goes way deeper than what I normally use it for if you want it to, which is pretty cool. Let's take a listen to it. Patch our sine wave into the output. You can FM it. Or we can go out of our final here, and then we have access to like our wave folder and these other crazy things. Okay, so that's two of my oscillators, and then I also have another sound source, which is rings. And this is a DIY panel that I have right here. This is a digital resonator. It does bells, strings, and membranes or something like that. Basically, it works as an audio processor or an oscillator in itself, which is really cool. This module is incredibly deep, and it's also not very new. It's kind of a classic, and for a very good reason. It sounds amazing. It's great for ambience or making things more interesting. And for me, like so far, this module is just like infinitely deep. Here, let's check out the sound real quick. And I'll just trigger it with a looping envelope here. So this is the sympathetic strings mode, which is, as you can probably imagine, it's great for adding underneath other things that are going on. Rather than just having it do its own thing, I'm gonna have it process the audio from the DPO. So I'll send a square wave in. So yeah, it does stuff like that. Different modes too. Extremely interesting module. Next, I have my little Zlob modular triple cap chaos, which is kind of like a noise source. Honestly, I don't think this thing sounds that pleasing. Let's hear it. Oh yeah, there it is. It's really more of like audio rate modulation. You can send it a signal. So yeah, that thing's crazy. A lot of the style I'm going for here is really mellow and just adding small amounts of something like a little bit of chaos. So this is perfect for that. Aside from that, I also have two different ring modulators in here, and they both have completely different flavors. So I have a Dupfer ring modulator, which is just this tiny little thing. And I also have my Erica Synths Fusion ring modulator, which uses a tube. So let's check out the tube one first. This module is really, really cool, but I'm actually not sure if I'm going to keep it in my case because it's so aggressive. So I'm going to turn down the signal and the carrier. And really, with this stuff that I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to keep it so mellow, and this thing is so wild all the time. So I patched two sine waves in. So yeah, this thing's awesome. It's super fun to play around with, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's mellow enough for me. We'll see if it sticks around. Other than that, I think it's the coolest ring modulator ever. It's just a little aggressive for me. Let's check out the dub for one in comparison. So this, in the Erica one, you have control over your levels. On this one, you don't. So I'm going to patch it into a VCA here. And then we'll just run through that. So I can control one of the levels. That one's a lot mellower, and like listening to the different sound demos and just listening to the modules on their own, like I think this one sounds way cooler, but ultimately, so far, this one has proven to be a lot more useful for what I'm doing. While we're looking at this module, this one also has sample and hold in it, and track and hold. Sample and hold is super, super important. It basically turns a largely monophonic system like this into something closer to duophonic. All you have to do is clock it slower than your sequence using a clock divider and sample the pitch CV before it gets to the second oscillator. You basically get 2 lines for the price of 1, and it's really fun to play around with. So yeah, this thing's great. It also has a slew limiter if you want to do any averaging. Next, let's check out my mixer. So my mixer is the Erica Synths Fusion mixer. And this thing is unbelievable. I've talked about it plenty of times on this channel. This is the best mixer I've ever used. Let's just take a listen. I'll plug in a sine wave. Yep, there we go. So up until about this point, it's clean. And then once you get past it, I'm compensating for the gain on my master output here, but basically it starts asymmetrically clipping because that's what tubes do. And this is really nice in a mixer scenario. The other cool thing about this mixer is when you have multiple sources going into it, they'll elbow each other out of the way when they get too loud and kind of compress. Let's do that. So go 2 sine waves. I'll go into these 2. Clipping a little bit. They push each other out of the way, and it just smashes them together in a way that really helps just mix easier. And it sounds more vintage. I love the tube sound. This is fantastic. So yeah, it's asymmetrical clipping like the Matriarch mixer, but it's rougher, dirtier, and just better in my opinion. Sounds amazing. Next, let's check out the filters. Now, some parts of this system are a little bit in flux, like this ring modulator may not stay. Another thing that may or may not stay is my Polivoks VCF. Now, I actually love this VCF. It's not my main one in the system. The main filter is this diode ladder wave filter from AJH Synth, which is incredible. It's my favorite filter. This one was my first Eurorack filter that I ever got, and man, it's like arguably worthless. On Modular Grid, I think it says it's worth like $40 maybe. It's a 2-pole filter. It's bendy. It's bubbly. The resonance mixes well with the input. It sounds old. I love this filter. I've always loved it from the moment I got it. And yeah, it's still making it in. So this thing is really great. But it's the one thing that I want out of this filter that it doesn't give me is the resonance doesn't go all the way down to the floor. Basically, if you, I'll just patch out of it into my interface and crank up the resonance so it self-oscillates. So if you listen to this, as it gets really low, the resonance goes pretty low. But down here in the really low bass, it kind of goes away. But regardless, this still complements the wave filter because this is like a little bit more normal of a filter. This thing is just crazy. So it's a ladder filter, but just because it's a ladder filter doesn't mean it's like a Moog style ladder filter. This is different because it's a diode ladder filter. And there were other synths like the Musonic Sonic 5, which is a synth that was made by an ex-Moog employee in 1972. And this was a way of getting around the patent laws of using the Moog filter. So this has a completely different character than a Moog ladder filter. This is dirtier, it's grimier, and it's definitely weirder. It also has kind of like some strange dead spots in it. Let's check it out. I'll patch a I'm going to patch a square tooth. A square tooth. I will patch this square tooth. I'm going to patch this square wave into the wave filter because the sawtooth wave that comes out of the DPO isn't really a sawtooth. It's a little bit different. Half the battle with this system is just gain staging. Well, maybe it's more than half the battle. This could be 90% of the battle. So you got an in-level knob here. And if I'm running through my mixer, then I've got in-level there. Also, that adds distortion. It's a lot of subtle saturation and things. So yeah, there it is, and I'm going to give it some resonance. You hear how the resonance gets louder as it goes higher and higher in frequency? That's part of this filter. It's weird, it's not exactly ideal, but I think the character of this filter makes up for it. It's so strange sounding. And that was with like a little bit of input level. If you give it less input, it'll act differently. Or if you give it more input, it'll also act differently. So yeah, this thing is very temperamental. Everything's dependent on the input level. The resonance is dependent on the frequency. It's all over the place, but it has the character. It doesn't sacrifice on character. And I love this module because it's a bigger filter. So I've got plenty of space to play with the knob here. Same with this one. Let's check this one out. Yeah, this one rips a little bit more than the diode filter. Definitely more aggressive. but not quite as much vibe. Still has a great vibe to it though. I mean, I've kept it around for a reason. And just listen to the resonance. Listen to it bubble. Now, this is my main criteria for a good filter. If it bubbles, then that's a filter that I'm going to get down with. Same with this one. This one will bubble too. Not as bubbly as this one. This one's definitely more aggressive, but it's got that sizzle to it. Otherwise, like some of these more modern, more engineered filters, they just sound, they end up sounding stale really quickly to my ears. The other thing that the Sonic 15 filter has is a couple of wave shapers. And I think they're wave folders. If you want, and there's a mix knob, so I can turn up the amount of wave shaping and mix it in. We'll just max it out. So you have a wave shaper for your main signal, and you also have a wave shaper for the resonance if you want to boost it even more, which is pretty cool. Let's check that out. You know, another thing that I like about this is that when you turn up the resonance, it drops the bass. You get the drop in bass. And yeah, again, more engineered filters don't have this. And a lot of people consider it a bad thing. I'm not one of those people, though. I think that the drop in bass when you add resonance is incredibly useful because it helps focus the listener to the thing that's interesting that's going on, which is what's happening in the resonance. But yeah, so those are my two filters. I think they complement each other pretty nicely, although they're both vibe heavy filters. We got nothing clean going on here. Everything's adding a little bit more than it's supposed to. Let's check out the effects. So here I have my Strymon Magneto. I made a whole video on this guy. You know, the input saturates. It's got wow and flutter, crinkle, this really tropical sounding spring reverb here. It's got a clock divider with 4 different outs. And I've tried other delays and Magneto is still the king. This is the only module I've ever sold and then rebought because it's the best. If you want to check out my video on Magneto, you can check it out up there. My other effect is the Music Thing Modular Spring Reverb. I actually have a huge spring reverb tank inside this thing. It covers like the entire back wall. And it's a different flavor of spring than Magneto offers. It's wilder, it's more overdrivable, you can smack it if you want. It softens things up a bit and it makes them more ambient and more pleasing to the general listener. So it's less for hardcore sound design and more for a pleasurable journey. Sometimes if I'm patching this and my wife is in the room, I live in a small apartment, it's got to sound good. So a lot of the times I'll just turn up a little bit of reverb while I'm working within this in order to just keep it sounding good as I'm doing experimental stuff that I'm not sure if it's going to work. And then I'll eventually back off of it. So let's take a listen. Okay, so as far as VCAs go, I have these drawer analog inputs, dual line inputs, and these are great. I have them plugged in my patch bay right now, so I want to be able to process external signals through all of this and just have it be kind of a vibe machine that you can run anything through and it'll just come out sounding vintage. It'll sound old in some way. So yeah, these are just fantastic amps that clip really nicely, although I try not to clip them. And yeah, it's got balanced ins. On that note, I also have my Sono Abatus, which is by Noise Engineering. It's 2 audio outs. It's got headphones out too. It runs in stereo. This thing's great. Got no complaints about that. And it's also balanced. So this thing entirely works with my patch bay and I don't get any extra noise. And as far as actual voltage controllable amps, my main VCAs are from the Talon from Chaos. This thing just loves to overdrive. It's a dual VCA. And again, it goes with all of these others. Like this, you have to gain stage it right, and it'll give you some amount of strange like saturation clipping. This will do the same thing. This will do the same thing too. So let's listen to that. Okay, so there it is, not clipping, and it's got 3 different settings for drive. Linear will give you soft clipping. Or you can switch to symmetric, which is more aggressive. Or asymmetric, which is less aggressive. I find that most of the time I just use linear mode, I'll send in like an envelope to it, which will just overdrive for a second there, just in the transient. You can see in the light when the light turns red, for example, is when it's overdriving. Just different flavors, more things to add in. You know, when I'm using any of these, I'm just using a touch. I just add a little bit of drive in the mixer, a little bit of drive here, although I have it maxed out right now, and a little bit of drive here, and it all adds up. And all the bumper music in this video are just little musings that I've created with this system. Let's go down to the control panel. I organized this system to be playable, so most of the controls are down here low where I can get to them easily. So I have my Electrosmith 2164 dual VCA. It's linear, simple. I use these more as attenuators than anything else, but yeah, it's there. I also have my Zlob module dual VCA. This is a DIY module like the Chaos. These VCAs will offer hard clipping if I want it. This is really just to modulate modulations though. My main modulation source is my Erica Synths black joystick. And we're really starting with the coolest one here. This is like 8 LFOs, but better. You draw the shapes of the LFOs with the joystick, which is incredibly useful in human. And it has a record function, so you can record up to 8 seconds of like movement. So maybe I want to record that, and I have this movement now and it'll repeat it. So this is great for like having a real-time feel, having that human element, and you can use your ears to do it. There are no VCAs required because you can, like, the amount that you move this really changes it. Let's take a listen. So I'll plug in X1 here to be our VCA amount, and I'll set Y1 to be our filter frequency. So this is great for something like that, but I actually think this example is clearer when there's a sequence running. So I'm going to just put a sequence in here. Okay, so now this joystick is controlling, looks like my envelope amount for my amp envelope. And it's also controlling a little bit of the filter frequency. So it records your CV, repeats in real time. You can use your ears. When you use all of these, it approaches almost generative level modulation very quickly, but it's all you. And you don't have to worry so much about the abstract part of modular, and you can just feel it out. You know, you can always take back manual control when it's running. And then just let go, and it'll go back to doing what it was doing before. I'm a total LFO hater. They're too predictable for most uses, unless you're getting clever. And if you think about it, LFOs are kind of like sequencers, but worse, but we use them anyway as an easy shortcut. Well, the joystick is even easier and doesn't require a VCA or an attenuator. So why aren't these absolutely everywhere? I don't think people really understand that it's not just like a mod wheel gimmick. At least that's what I thought. But this brings us to the next module, which is my LFO. This is the Erica Synths Black Octasource. It's everything that you could want from an LFO and 8 outputs. Given that I have a joystick, this doesn't get as much use as it probably deserves. But I use it for synced modulation. And the other cool thing about it is that you can use each of the 8 outputs phase offset 45 degrees from each other. And this is the cleverness that I was talking about. This module has it baked in. So if it's time to get crazy and modulate 8 different things, I can do it. Or 16, including the joystick. I also have my Erica Synths dual ASR envelopes, which are EMS Synthy style envelopes. The knob ranges are really great on them. They're unique in that they don't like to cut off their attack stage by getting a short gate. So it's easier to use with a sequencer. Your sequence won't disappear. It just comes out a little different with each note, which is a good thing. And it has patchable attack and release times, which is essential for repeating sequences. I also have my 2HP EG, which is just a simple traditional envelope generator. It's small, and 3 envelopes is really the sweet spot for me. So I can control volume, filter, and pitch, or volume, filter, and vibrato depth. You know, I don't think I've ever used 4 envelopes on a single voice outside of making analog claps. So yeah, I have 3. I also have my little 2HP clock divider here. It's a dual clock divider. It's essential for syncing everything up, like delay and some gates. I love this module and actually have 2. I only included 1 because I've experimented and using 2 was a little excessive. I'd rather keep it simpler, and it's just easier for me to focus on what matters rather than crazy polyrhythmic stuff. Lastly, I have my sequencer, which is my Korg SQ1. I'll also use my keyboard from the Matriarch to control this, but this is really the main control source for this system. This sequencer has been my go-to for years. I'm sure there are more exciting ones out there, but this one's never let me down, and I think familiarity is important here. Kind of like how most synths use a keyboard interface because it's familiar. It has 2 CV outs, 2 gate outs, gate length control, pitch quantization to 1, 2, or 5 octaves, or 8, which is hertz per volt for an MS-20. I wish it had some more MIDI capabilities, but it has MIDI out for like an okay sync, but it definitely has the magic that I want out of this system. An 8-step sequence may only play 6 or 7 of the notes the same as the time before, especially in unquantized mode. It can be a little inaccurate, but it's always close enough to call it mojo. For that reason, lots of sequences end up being twice or 4 times as long as they're kind of supposed to be, which is pretty cool in my book. Okay, so that's the whole rig. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you want me to go over any more of these things in more detail. See ya!